for joining us today for our virtual LPS Learning Lunch series. Today's program features Lincoln Community Learning Center's Director Nola Derby-Bennett. Nola has served as the Director of Community Learning Centers at Lincoln Public Schools since 2017. Lincoln Community Learning Centers provide a fun, educational delivery system that uses 29 of our neighborhood schools as the central gathering place for students, families, and neighborhoods. Today, Nola will take a deep dive into the goals of our community learning centers and how the CLCs focus on helping to develop smart kids, thriving families, and strong neighborhoods. Please join me in welcoming Nola Derby-Bennett.
Thanks, Mindy. I'm super excited to be here today. So my goal for this time that we're together is to help the listeners to create a deeper understanding of the full-service community school strategy and why CLCs are important for our students, families, and our neighborhoods. You're going to hear me use a couple of different interchangeable phrases. Sometimes we call our CLCs community learning centers, or CLC. Sometimes we refer to it as full-service community school, and sometimes you'll hear the phrase community schools. All of these mean the same thing. And again, here in Lincoln, we generally refer to them as community learning centers, or CLCs. So I think one of the first things that is important to recognize is that community learning centers are both a place and a strategy. So I think very commonly, most people, when they think of community learning centers, think of our before and after school programming at our CLC schools, and that's absolutely true. CLCs provide a safe place for students before and after school, and the beauty is what is happening during that time. So the strategy related to community learning centers is really that collaborative partnership that we bring together within our schools with our lead agency partners, with community educators, with families, and engaging neighborhood residents. And so, again, community learning centers are both a place and a strategy. I'm going to show a video that will give a really great overview of what a community school looks like, how a community school is built, and who are the stakeholders involved in the community learning center strategy. And then after the video, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what that community school strategy looks like here in Lincoln. So let me switch over to our video.
What makes a school a great school? Caring for the whole child. Expanding the horizons of learning. Building relationships with families. Working together to realize a shared vision. This is the school every student needs. This is a community school. Community schools are public schools that partner with stakeholders to create the conditions students need to thrive. Community schools can be found across the United States, and their numbers are growing fast. But what exactly makes a school a community school? They integrate student supports. Clinics, counselors, and other services ensure each and every student is ready to learn. They expand and enrich learning. Extended school days, summer programs, and real-world experiences help students reach their full potential. They engage families and communities. Partnering with residents to identify and meet community needs makes everyone feel safe, welcome, and involved in school. They lead in collaboration. Inclusive decision-making and peer learning builds trust among students, educators, families, and communities. When a school stands on these 4 pillars, it's a community school. Research supports this 4-pillar approach, but there's no one-size-fits-all model. Every community school is different because each community is different. Figuring out what it looks like in your community starts by getting actual community members involved. That's the full-time job of community school coordinators. They're the human bridge connecting all the partners and stakeholders that make community schools possible. So that's what makes a school a community school. Now, how do you pay for it? Startup costs like hiring a full-time coordinator can be raised from foundations or state and local governments. Tapping into existing funding and partnering with local businesses can bring in service providers. Sharing resources and staff with partners can help everyone do more. And as a community school becomes more established, leaders can advocate for budgets that sustain their impact and new funding to expand it. Every community school is different. What will yours be like? Get started at communityschools.futureforlearning.org.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the picture that video laid out for us, and just how that looks here in Lincoln. Again, like I shared, the community learning centers are both a place and a strategy, and we have lots of partners that make that happen for us. So one of the ways that I like to explain what a community learning center school is, or what a community school is compared to a traditional school, and I like to use the analogy of a traditional telephone versus a smartphone. So a traditional telephone has a job. It does a thing, right? You can pick it up, you can make phone calls on it, and that's what it does. It does that function. But when you think about a smartphone, smartphones are tailored for each user, right? So we can pick up our smartphones, we can put them in a pile, and we can look at the apps that are on them, and we're probably going to see very different things. Some people use their smartphones for playing games. Some of them mostly are used for social connections. Some of them may be used for entertainment or learning. You might have apps on your smartphone that help you listen to music. You may be listening to books or reading books on your phone. You may even be learning a new language through an app on your phone, on your smartphone. You may be managing your finances. You might be using your smartphone to find resources. We know that there are apps that connect us to our local resources here, even here in Lincoln. And it also does the thing, right? So it still does the traditional function of that traditional phone. And so I think that that's a really interesting sort of visual analogy for, a traditional school versus a community school. And again, each person can tailor their smartphone to, their personal needs, and they all look a little bit different. So let's talk a little bit about how a community school begins. Here in Lincoln, community learning centers have been in operation for 21 years. We started in 1999 with 4 schools and a $100,000 budget. We have grown over those years and now are serving 29 schools and are running a budget of just under $9 million. So clearly a lot of growth and clearly a lot of input and engagement as we've grown. And so how a community school begins is first we have to identify the schools, the eligible schools. So all community learning centers here in Lincoln are schools that have a population of 40% or higher students who qualify for free or reduced lunch. So there's an economic threshold for which a community learning center school qualifies for funding that we apply for. All of our community learning center schools begin, or the seed money that starts a community learning center school is 21st Century Community Learning Center funding. That is federal dollars that are facilitated through the Nebraska Department of Education. The CLC office identifies which schools are eligible, and then we apply for those funds through the Nebraska Department of Ed. Once those schools have been identified, once that grant application has been approved, then the next step is to put out a request for proposals for a lead agency for that school. So we're building on the collaboration, right? So now we have the Lincoln Public Schools at the table. We now have funding. We have the Nebraska Department of Education at the table with dollars. And so now we need to have a partner to deliver our services and our program. So we put out a request for proposals for a lead agency, and we work with the principal to identify stakeholders at their school who will help make a decision about which lead agency is the best fit for their school. So we have 10 lead agency partners here in Lincoln. I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute that lists all of our lead agency partners. They're all amazing. They all do really great things at their schools, and they're all a little bit different. And so it's really important to find the right match of lead agency for the needs of that school. And so we go through an interview process where we include parents in that decision making, as well as school staff, principal, coordinators, sometimes teachers are a part of that interview process. As we added a couple of high schools last year, or a couple years ago, we even included high school students in that process. So we wanted to make sure that everybody who was a stakeholder was going to be able to be represented in the decision-making process of selecting a lead agency. And then LPS, the Community Learning Center's office, and the lead agency work together along with the school to really identify what are the needs in that school. So, you know, we might be looking at school improvement data. We might be looking at trends that are happening in neighborhoods. We might be, you know, talking with Lincoln Police Department to identify, you know, what are they seeing and what supports might be needed within the school. So, again, very collaborative process. The Community Learning Center's office sort of carries that vision and carries that framework forward and kind of drives that bus, but we want to make sure that the input is really coming from all of the stakeholders who are going to be served and supported by the Community Learning Center at that school. So again, just who are the stakeholders? Who are the people? We talked about Lincoln Public Schools. My CLC office, we are a department within Lincoln Public Schools. We have our lead agencies. We have the school community coordinator, which we're going to talk about in a second. We have the school, so leadership at the school as well as teachers, our students, parents, community partners, and the neighborhood residents. We can't forget our neighborhood residents. They're really important in this equation. And everybody brings something to the table that will help us to create a great community learning center. So just a little bit more about the CLC office. We have 10 staff on our team. We have a couple of folks who do our office work and manage those dollars and help us with that reporting back to the Nebraska Department of Education. We work with a local evaluator to really help us tell the story, to help us measure the impact that we're having. We have 2 curriculum specialists on our team, so folks who are very well-versed and who are experts in after-school education and helping our sites to deliver high-quality programming to our students. And then we have a team of family and community folks on our team. And you may be wondering, how does that work in a school system? Why do we have a team of half of the staff for the CLCs who are focusing on family and community and neighborhoods? So we have a family neighborhood engagement specialist, and then we also have 4 community builders on our team. And what they do is really help our sites to continually engage families in the education of their students, in the improvement of their school neighborhoods, and empowering families and neighborhoods to use, and neighbors to use their voices to advocate for themselves and for their neighborhood. And then we also have a grad student who has worked with us for several years, who helps us with leading community cafes, who helps us with team building and professional development with our team, and in this last year, who has really been instrumental in partnering with Beyond School Bells with the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation to educate other potential full-service community school providers across the state in, what does it take to go from a before and after school provider to a full-time, a full-service community school. So a really great team. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge how important it is to have such a strong and solid team who are supporting our CLCs. Next, I want to acknowledge our lead agency partners. Again, there are 10 of them. These are names that you definitely will recognize if you have been paying attention to the human service world here in Lincoln. We have, obviously some providers that traditionally have do after-school programming like Boys and Girls Club. We have those nationally recognized names, and then we also have our locally homegrown nonprofit providers. So we have like Cedars and Civic Nebraska and Family Service, and then we also have our community centers. So Malone and Northeast Family Center and Willard Community Center are those organizations that are really focused on specific neighborhoods and who are really invested in specific populations within our community. So this is where the meat happens. This is where the meat of the work happens. And so we're going to talk first about the center of the triangle. So at the very center of the work that we do is the child. And then wrapped around that child are the family and the community. And we know that when the family and the community are thriving and are doing well, our children are doing well. And so all of the work that we do is really centered around the student first, then their family and their community that supports them. And then when we think about how do we implement full service community school in our schools, the key player in this work is the school community coordinator. Each one of our 29 CLCs have one full-time school community coordinator, one individual at each school hired by the lead agency whose job is dedicated to coordinating the services and supports for the students, their families, and the neighborhood. They work in close tandem with their school principal, with their school team, as well as their lead agency partners to bring the vision of the Community Learning Center at that school into action. So on the right side, I guess I'm thinking about this, right? Yeah. The right side, I had to think about which hand I was using. The right side of the triangle are our expanded learning opportunities, right? So these are the things that you think about when you think of CLC. These are the club opportunities that students are engaging in. This is the robotics that kids are participating in, the cooking clubs, the art clubs, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and all of those partners that we bring in to do the after-school programming, the club programming. Lots of community partners involved in this work. I was at a school earlier this week where we had skate school, so I was on a skateboard with a helmet and just like out there doing the skate school with the kids, and they were loving it. Those are opportunities they wouldn't necessarily always get at home or in their neighborhood, but facilitated by a community partner, they're able to learn how to skateboard, which may be something that they're interested in doing. And then we also have summer programming that takes place. So fully immersive summer programming that happens for our students, as well as real world experiences such as internships for our high school students. And at all of the corners of this triangle, the school community coordinator is doing the coordination. So they may be bringing in adults to facilitate this programming. They're talking to the school about what their school improvement needs are. If we have a school who maybe needs to do a little bit of work in engineering, in math, they may be bringing in makerspace programming or STEM programming or engineering clubs, just to give students a little bit more of a hands-on, applicable experience with those extended learning opportunities. And then on the left side of our triangle, that's our core instructional programming. So that's our school day programming, right? So our school community coordinator at the top is going to school improvement meetings and is talking with teachers and identifying what students may be needing a little bit of extra deep dive in order to coordinate those services that are on the right hand of the triangle. And then at the bottom are our comprehensive support services. So these are things, in the video they mentioned things like clinics and counselors and food and employment programming. And these may be programming that students are engaging in, but it may be programming that our parents are engaging in. So one example of this may be family literacy programming. So we have English language learners, we have refugees who are moving to our community who may not have very much experience with English at all, but who are super dedicated to their children and want to help their children succeed in school. So part of what they may be doing is going to school alongside their children, learning English, and then bringing that home and expanding their experiences within this, as a part of access to that support at the school. So again, the school community coordinator is figuring out what are the needs in our neighborhood and how do I bring those resources to the school. So, like I said, school community coordinator is key to the implementation of a successful community learning center. They are building relationships, they are finding and developing partnerships, and they are always working on tying that school day to the after-school experiences. We talked a lot about, and you heard in the video, each site is different. So there are many reasons for that. Each, our sites have different leadership. They may be operating under one of 10 different nonprofit organizations. They have different needs. We may have a school neighborhood that is in a food desert where there isn't a lot of fresh food available because there aren't a lot of grocery stores near where the schools are. So there may be more food opportunities, food boxes, or the vans that sometimes bring fresh fruits and vegetables. There might be community gardens at those schools because the parents just don't have local access to fresh food. They may be in a healthcare desert where there aren't a lot of healthcare providers in their school neighborhood, in a neighborhood that's convenient for them to get to. As an aside, we recently held a health and hire event with Bryan Health, where we had 92 individuals attend. They performed student physicals, but they also had a hiring fair going on, and they had 16 applicants for positions that are currently open at Bryan Health. They have already had two people hired, and there are 6 in process of getting hired. So of those 16 applications, half of them are going to be moving into employment opportunities at Bryan Health. So really great opportunity that Bryan Health partnered with us on to bring that into a neighborhood where there weren't healthcare resources or there weren't resources to help families to connect easily with employment opportunities. Another example of something that would make a site different or make programming at a site different is schools may be located in an area where a large employer has recently closed. And so now we have a large population of unemployed parents in that neighborhood. And so bringing in resources to help those parents find alternate employment opportunities is really important so that we don't end up with, either a lot of families moving to different locations or a lot of unemployed families in a concentrated location. So kind of thinking back to that smartphone analogy, right? This is where the App Store comes into play. So you look up, you pull up the App Store and you go, what are the things that I need? And then we add those apps. We download those things into our school to help our students and help their families, and ultimately to help their school neighborhoods. So what I hope you heard from me today is that our school community, or our community learning centers are collaborative in our community partnerships. We bring lots of partners to the table with the ultimate goal of helping our students, their families, and their neighborhoods. We really want the schools to be the hub of the neighborhood. We want the schools to be the place where people look to be able to get the resources that they need to be successful and thrive. And we need everybody at the table. We need all of those voices at the table to ensure the best possible outcomes for the students, the families, and our neighborhoods. So that's what I have.
All right, thank you, Nola. Now's the time for our questions and answers, and we had a couple entered in while you were talking.
Great.
So the first one is, what qualifies an organization to be a lead agency?
That's a great question. So, we don't have any for-profit businesses as lead agencies as of right now, but that's not to say that we couldn't have a for-profit business that might be interested in leading a community learning center. Right now, what qualifies an organization is capacity. Do they have the capacity to, bring in additional resources? The funding that we bring to the table doesn't cover the full cost of a community learning center, so we ask for contributions or leveraging resources to support the full cost of a community learning center, and then just a matched passion. So we want to make sure that what the school needs matches with what our partner is going to bring to the table.
Great. Next question. How many CLCs or schools assist with distributing food to students and families?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know if I can answer that question right now. I don't know.
Okay, don't know. We'll get the answer to that
Okay.
one. Is CLC partnering with family literacy to deliver programs to families?
Yes, absolutely. So actually, at our schools, a couple of our school community coordinators are also coordinators for the family literacy programs, but there are also lots of family literacy programs that happen with the coordinator being an LPS employee. That being said, the Community Learning Center is closely tied with that family literacy program, brings resources to the parents, engages the students in additional support programming that may be happening after school. And so we do lead a couple of them, but we definitely collaborate with all of them.
Next question. This one comes from Randy Bretz. Randy says, what is your vision for CLC in 10 years?
Randy Bretz, that's a great question. There are still 6 schools in our district that are at 40% or higher free and reduced lunch population that are not yet under the CLC umbrella. And part of the reason for that is funding and access to funding, as well as capacity. Over the last 2 years, so during the pandemic, my team has expanded pretty substantially from 4 staff when I started in 2017 to now a team of 10. And so part of that long-term vision is just continuing to build up the supports, build up those collaborative partnerships, continuing to expand. Since I've been on board in the last 4 years, we have added 3 additional schools. And so my vision is just to continue to expand. I hope to catch up and catch up to those last 6 schools that currently do qualify. And then my vision is to begin to start looking at where the needs are next and bring in community partners who can really help with supporting our continued expansion to eventually, I hope, all of our schools in Lincoln Public Schools, but then also to really make Lincoln a place on the map for community schools. I really want Lincoln to be recognized as our full-service community school community.
Great. And I'm just going to remind our audience, if you have any questions for Nola, you can enter it in the chat in either the Zoom or the Q&A in the Zoom, or you can enter it in the chat of Facebook. So I'm going to ask you about the snacks. Could you explain more about the snacks and what those are? First, what the snacks stand for,
Right.
And then how do they work?
So when Mindy says snack, she's not talking about cheese sticks, right? She's not talking about food that we give as in between meals. What she's talking about are school neighborhood advisory committees, so SNAC. And the snack, as it is connected to community learning centers, is really a collaborative leadership partnership between our principal, our school community coordinator, lead agency partners, and then interested community residents, so parents. Maybe the neighbor that lives across the street from the school, might be police officers who have a vested interest in a particular neighborhood. Really the possibilities are endless in terms of who can be a part of the school neighborhood advisory committee. And one of the things that they do is sort of listen to all of what's going on in a neighborhood and help drive the vision for that community learning center. So we really want our snacks to help inform the direction as far as programming goes, as far as community engagement goes, as far as family engagement goes. And the best example that I can give of a very recent experience with the school neighborhood advisory committee is Saratoga Elementary had a student who had been hit by a car in walking to school or walking from school, I don't remember which. And so the school neighborhood advisory committee invited Lincoln Transportation and Utilities to the table, LPS Security to the table, as well as parents and neighborhood residents who had thoughts or concerns about how to make that neighborhood safer for students who are walking. And they just recently had that conversation and are starting to kind of, develop a relationship with one another so that everyone's needs can be met, everyone's voices can be heard, and, it's a place where growth happens. So that's happening at all of our schools in some capacity. That was just one example of something that I knew happened just within a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you for answering that. One more question. How do schools get selected to have a community learning center?
Right, so we go back to that 40% or higher free or reduced lunch threshold. That's the trigger. That's what gets them on our watch list. And then that first application is for 21st Century Community Learning Centers funding. That's the seed funding that we use then to braid additional funding in order to get a community learning center started. So over the last 2 years, through the pandemic, Nebraska Department of Ed has not accepted new applications for 21st Century Learning Centers funding. So I think the next time that we would be eligible to apply for funding for a new school would be for the 23-24 school year.
And if somebody wants to learn more information about our community learning centers?
Well, the best place to find out more information is at our website, which is clc.lps.org.
Great. Nola, I don't have any other questions that have come in. I want to thank you for joining us today and for sharing this important information about our community learning centers. And thank you to our audience for joining us for our virtual learning lunch. Our next learning lunch will be Wednesday, December 15th at noon, where we will learn more about our Pathfinder program inside the Lancaster County Youth Services Center. And with that, have a great day.